Hello and welcome back to another special episode of Japan at War. I want to cover a very interesting person in history. And even though he isn't Japanese, he and people like him really shaped the early thoughts that Europeans had about Japan. And honestly, his works still does shape many Westerners' perceptions. So, who is he? What is his works? And are his views valid? Well, first I should mention that I'll be mostly working off of this book, which is a translation of his works from the 16th century to English from its original Portuguese. And that leads directly into who this man was. Well, he was a Portuguese Catholic missionary who arrived on the shores of Japan in the year of 1563 with the hopes to spread his native religion to the people there. He was Christian, of course. Within 1 year, he would travel to Kyoto from Hirado and then go on to meet the Shogun at the time, Ashikaga Yoshiteru, in 1565. Though it's been said that he was actually disappointed in meeting the Shogun as he saw him as weak and was depending on him for protection for both himself and the church that he was trying to establish there. He wasn't exactly wrong either, as the Shogun would fall not soon after, and it would actually take 3 years till his cousin, Ashikaga Yoshihide, would actually take control. During this time, Louis didn't have any real protection and was robbed several times, though he did save himself by not having much, anything worth to the thieves. Yoshihide wouldn't last long as shogun, as he died on October 28, 1563 from illness. Then Oda Nobunaga would march his armies into the capital and install Ashikaga Yoshiaki as the 15th shogun and his puppet. Though that may be a touch unfair, as he did try and fight back against him being, used, though he was unsuccessful. In 1569, Louis would meet the warlord Oda Nobunaga. Nobunaga was kind of tired of the Buddhist ways, and Louis, used this to his advantage by bringing up certain characteristics of his faith that Nobunaga would appreciate. Eventually, he was able to convince Nobunaga that Christianity would actually benefit him. And even though he himself would never convert, he did give him his permission to spread Christianity, which would take him to Kyushu. He spent about 3 years there acting as a translator for the Jesuit Alessandro Valegnejo. In 1583, his superior ordered him to stop his missionary work and to instead focus his efforts toward recording the activities of the Society of Jesus in Japan. The collected data that would be gathered would become Frois' History of Japan. In 1582, Louis apparently witnessed the death of Oda Nobunaga from his church that actually wasn't that far away from the Honnoji Temple. This is what part of his account would say. "We began to hear shots and see flames. After this, another report came. We learned that the noise was not a simple brawl, but that Akechi Mitsuhide had turned traitor and had Nobunaga surrounded. When Akechi's men reached the gates, they entered without resistance, as no one suspected him of treachery. Nobunaga had washed his hands and face and was drying himself with a towel when they found him and shot him in the side with an arrow. Pulling out the arrow, he came out carrying a naginata, a weapon that looked like a scythe. He fought for some time, but after being shot in the arm, he retreated into his chamber and shut the doors. Some say he cut his belly, while others believe he set fire to the temple and perished in the flames." Louis had lost his patron. We know, of course, that it would be Toyotomi Hideyoshi that would revenge Nobunaga's death and succeed him. But would he be as generous to Louis and the other Jesuits were? At first, yes, but due to many reasons, Hideyoshi decided that they actually had too much influence, and in 1587 started to have Christians expelled. Luis was able to settle in Nagasaki after that. In 1592, he settled to Nikao, but returned to Nagasaki in 1595 and then died July 8, 1597. He was 65 at the time of his death. So that's an overview of the history of this man. So what are some of his works? Or more, what are some of the things that he said and how accurate were they? Well, let's read some of it. We eat everything with our hands. The Japanese, both men and women, from the time that they are children, eat with 2 sticks. This is of course true, and for the most part, it was actually considered very rude to eat with their hands. Louis' surprise by this is actually pretty understandable, as it was a very different custom from how it was in Europe. Let's see what he says about the children. With us, it is normal to whip and punish a child, and in Japan, it is very rare, and they only reprimand them. Now this astonishment is understandable. Even today, the Japanese actually think it's more valuable to explain to a child why what they're doing is wrong. And it's not uncommon for a mother to get eye level with the child to explain this either. While in the West, corporal punishment was and still is pretty common. And in my personal opinion, this doesn't work that well. Or it didn't work that well with me at least. Let's continue with his view on horses. Our horses are beautiful. Japanese horses are greatly inferior to ours. Now this is a matter of opinion, of course. And I'll be honest with you, I think Louis had a bit of a Western superiority complex. Honestly, I don't think Louis even had that much interaction with horses in general to be able to make such a statement. Our stables have earthen floors. Theirs have wood planking. Now this wouldn't be true everywhere, although for the most part it is true. The idea is that the wood flooring would keep the hooves of the horses dry, and thus keep the animal healthier. Now let's see what he actually has to say about some of the Japanese combat. The people of Europe are accustomed to thrusting during a sword fight. The Japanese never do so. Now, obviously, this isn't true, and I'd wager he only made these judgments after seeing a small duel between 2 samurai. Now, typically, you would see them use a draw cut to end it as fast as possible. Now, other than that, I have no idea how he came to this conclusion. We use halberds, they use naginatas shaped like a sickle. Okay, I'm going to have to give him a complete pass on this. Japanese polearms are a complicated subject, and I see martial artists even to this day get this wrong. They did have them, and they didn't really have separate names for them though. Halberds, I mean. So why do I bring all this up? Is it to criticize him? Well, no. Although I do take issue with several of the things that he wrote, there's still so much value in them. This gives us not only a look at Japanese culture through the eyes of a European of the same time period, but it at times gives us a glimpse of how he viewed his own culture, especially when presented with a very different one. Now, if you enjoy my work, please check me out on Patreon, and also make sure to like the video. I could really use your help with several projects. I'll see you next time.